Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. 3 different people sent me emails along the lines of what to do if I haven't accomplished anything in life. And I thought I'd talk about that after 11 seconds of me accomplishing playing the riff from Love Her All I Can by Kiss from Dressed to Kill. Alright, that was 11 seconds of me playing the riff from Love Her All I Can by Kiss, one of my favorite Kiss songs from the album Dressed to Kill, and there's my Dressed to Kill t-shirt. I always like that image, it's kind of funny. Apparently none of the guys in Kiss except for Peter Criss, the drummer, actually owned suits, so they had to borrow them, and none of them fit very well except for Peter Criss's because it was his suit. And also you can see Gene Simmons is wearing clogs on the cover. Go look it up and you'll find out. Anyway, weirdly, 3 different people wrote me emails with questions along the lines of what to do if they feel they haven't accomplished anything in life. And I'm thinking, well, 3 people write me this all at once. Maybe there's something in the air. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on that I don't know about. The people are talking about accomplishment. But anyway, I think it's an interesting question from a Zen perspective, but I don't know if I can answer it. And the reason I don't know is this is the 4th time I have tried to record this video, and each time I've gotten kind of tongue-tied in the middle of it and haven't been able to say anything coherent. So we're going to try again. So let's see what happens. Okay. So when I got these questions, I immediately thought about William Smith Clark. And there are 2 Americans that every Japanese person knows about, and they're always surprised that American people don't know who they are. And the one is Matthew Perry, Commodore Matthew Perry, and you should know who he is, because I guess Matthew Perry was the name of the guy on Friends too, isn't it? Anyway, whatever. Was it that right? Anyway, I never watched Friends. But so Commodore Matthew Perry was the guy who opened Japan up to foreign trade in 1868, and he was an American Commodore in the Navy. So he's an important historical figure, and I do think Americans should know who he is. The other one, William Smith Clark, is probably less important to Americans, but he was an American educator who lived in Hokkaido, which is the northernmost island in the Japanese archipelago. And he lived there in the 19th century when there were very few foreigners in Japan. If you watched the movie Last Samurai, you can see what it was like in those days. I think that's probably a fairly accurate depiction, except for some of the things that Tom Cruise does in the movie. Anyway, whatever. So he lived in Japan in those days, and he educated at a boys' school. He was a teacher at a boys' school up there. And his big motto is, "Boys be ambitious." And the reason I'm pointing up in the air, you can't see that I'm pointing up in the air, is because there's a statue of him in Hokkaido with the motto, "Boys be ambitious," on the bottom of it. And I remember once that during a lecture, somehow this quote came up. I don't know if this is Nishijima Roshi's lecture. Sorry, I didn't say that. He gave lectures every Saturday, and I attended pretty much all of them. But somehow this quote came up, and Nishijima Roshi went on a little bit of a tangent about why that was a really bad slogan. Like, he really disagreed with this idea of boys be ambitious. Because ambition is kind of what gets us into trouble. Maybe it's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that gets us into trouble, especially when it comes to Zen practice, but in life in general. So I think the idea of accomplishments is overrated. An accomplishment, when you feel that you haven't accomplished anything in life, like these people who wrote to me, you're comparing your life as it is now, your real life, your actual real existence, with some fantasy of what you think it ought to be. You know, you think you ought to be famous, you think you ought to be rich, you think you ought to be having done something that people will remember you forever, whatever, you know, or I don't know. I don't know what the specific situations were for all of these people who wrote me, but they just felt they had not accomplished anything. Now, I might look like somebody who's accomplished a lot, and in some sense I have, because I wanted to make records when I was young, and I made records as Dementia 13. Some people will remember, but most of you who have forgotten, I don't know if you even knew in the first place. So I did that, And then I wanted to work in a company to make Japanese monster movies, and I did that. And I wanted to write books, and I did that. And now I've got this video channel, which I never really wanted to be a YouTuber, but because YouTube didn't exist when I was young. But it's reasonably successful. It's not. I think some people overestimate how successful this YouTube channel is. I get about 1,000 views per video. Some of them get more, but not many of them get much more than that, 1,000 or 2,000. So it's not that big. But, it keeps me off the streets. It keeps me employed, and things are working. So that's nice. But, when I think about that, though, when I was young, I probably thought each of these things that I wanted to accomplish, if I accomplished them, then everything would be great. I mean, this is kind of the way you think when you're young, I think. At least it's the way I thought when I was young. But, the rock and roll career never turned out because I never toured with those albums, and I was stupid and I didn't really understand how important it was to tour behind an album, especially an independently made, low-level album. I thought you could be Brian Wilson and just stay at home and make records, but you have to be Brian Wilson to do that, and I was not Brian Wilson. But I had a friend who we used to hang out with in high school, Steve, and he became a rather successful rock and roll star because he was the drummer eventually after high school, obviously, for the band Warrant, who you may not remember, but they had a big hit called She's My Cherry Pie, or I guess it was just called Cherry Pie. But Warrant kind of crashed and burned. I think even Steve would admit this, and it became kind of ugly because the whole grunge revolution was on its way, and they had no idea, and they were sideswiped by it. And their singer, Janie Lane, ended up dying of alcohol and drug abuse, and he was kind of bloated, and it was sad. And then Steve was left adrift after this. And Steve, if you're watching, I hope you're not insulted by any of this, because the last time I saw Steve, he was happy, he was married, things were going pretty good for him. Warrant was back on tour, not as big as they used to be, but they were doing things, and it was all right. But it didn't fix all his problems, and I could see, having watched that happen, oh my gosh, that's where I would have gone, if things had been successful for me. I thought working at Tsuburaya Productions, who made the Japanese monster films, would be a joy, and it was a joy, but it didn't fix all my problems. It was still, in the end, just a job. After a while, I was like, oh, I don't want to go to work today, and I'm going, man, this is the job I wanted. When I was a kid, I envied me for having this job, and I was going, because the actual work was different from what I expected it to be. Things were different. Writing books, too. I wanted to be a science fiction writer. That was my dream in high school, and I used to write science fiction stories. And I didn't get to do that, but I did get this career writing books about Zen Buddhism. So that was good, but, in order to make money off it, it was very difficult. My royalties from book royalties are awful. The last check I got for it was covering, I think, 9 different books over the course of a year, and it was $500. So that's what I'm making off book royalties, folks. So now you know. Was it 9 books? 8 books? I don't remember. However many books I published with New World Library, they sent me $500 for the year's sales. That was 2024 sales, I guess. Anyway, so I at one point, in order to make a living, I was homeless. I wasn't living under a bridge or anything as bad as that, but I did not have an abode. I gave up having an apartment or any place to live, and I just traveled for the year. And when the times when I didn't have a lot of gigs, I had a few people in parts of the country that would let me sleep on their couches. Thank you very much for letting me do that, if any of you are still watching this. That turned out to be kind of a debacle, but things worked out anyway. But the thing about accomplishment is, as I said, it's measuring your life against what you think it ought to be. What I thought a rock star would have been, and what I thought being an author would have been, what I thought working for Tsuburaya Productions would have been. None of those were exactly what it was. And even when it comes to Zen, this can get in the way. So let's talk about Zen, because that's what you're here for, I guess. In Zen terms, often what you want to accomplish is Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete, perfect, unsurpassed enlightenment. And people are wanting to have this experience of Kensho or Satori, and they think that's going to be the thing, and they're ambitious to get it, and they work hard and get it. And there's two things that can happen. One is if you try too hard to accomplish that sort of thing, it can make you a little crazy. I mentioned this about people working on koans before, but it happens to all kinds of people in the spiritual sort of world. If they're really ambitious to get one of these great grand spiritual experiences, often they'll do things that are not good for their body or mind, and they'll get a little crazy. The other thing that happens is there's a guy, I've forgotten his name, maybe I'll remember, it doesn't matter. He's a guy who's a YouTuber, and I've seen him a few times, and he had a Kensho experience, and this is his thing. And I'm watching these videos. I've never watched one all the way through because it just gives me the ick when I watch them. I don't know that much about the guy, so I can't really say whether his experience is genuine or not. My sense, just from watching the videos, is that he is sincere. I get the sense that he's not making this up. He's not an actor. He's not just fantasizing. He probably had some kind of a grand spiritual experience, and he's very happy about it on his videos. But what he's doing is he's telling a lot of stuff about the experience and the nature of the experience and what it means and blah, blah, blah. And he's done, I don't know, I've seen 3 different videos, and there's probably more where he's talking about this. But he's also using it, he's also monetizing it, in terms of the videos. And also in terms of, I think he does kind of a life coaching thing. So the fact that he's had this Kensho experience is great for his life coaching gig, because people might want to get life coached by somebody who's had a Kensho, a full enlightenment experience. But there is a good reason that we folks in the Zen tradition don't talk about these experiences. Even Dogen, all Dogen says about his experience is he dropped off body and mind, and then he went to his teacher, said, I have dropped off body and mind, and his teacher said, yes, but has dropping off body and mind been dropped off? And he says, yes. And that's the thing. Dogen had to drop off the dropping off of body and mind, which sounds weird, but he had to drop the experience in order to, eventually he got his teacher's approval and he became Dharma transmitted, but his teacher thought that was important for him to drop that experience. You have to drop that experience. And accomplishments are difficult to drop. You have them and you get praise for them, and even in my case, all of these things have become a little bit of a problem. I'm now the author that people want to talk to, and they go, whoa, and they get all fanish with me, and it gets weird, and I get uncomfortable when talking to people who are too much of fans of mine. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's uncomfortable. It's weird. They become a kind of a thing that you glom onto. Glom is probably not. What is glom even a word? Anyway, you latch on to these things. Like that guy with his enlightenment experience has latched onto the experience, and now it's my experience, and now it's part of me. Ugh! It's one of my accomplishments. Oops, sorry. I accomplished dropping my phone off my knee. Anyway. He's got it, and he's accomplished it, and it's become a thing that is part of him, part of his persona, part of his personality. One of the things he's done in life that's great, and he can talk about it and make money off of it. And to a certain extent, this is the case with me too, because I wrote about it in my book Hardcore Zen. I wrote about this experience of walking across a bridge. If any of you have read Hardcore Zen, you probably remember that. That initially, I will say, when I first wrote the book, was a minor part of the book, and then the editor I had insisted that we make it sort of the climax of the book. and move it to a different part of the book so it seemed like everything is moving towards that, and yay, and that's wonderful. And that's one of the reasons I kind of didn't like Hardcore Zen when it came out, because it was changed around to make that the centerpiece, and now it's become the centerpiece. And because I've allowed it to become the centerpiece, now I've got a career, but I've also got this thing that I've spoiled by putting it in a book and kind of bragging about it, and that's a problem, and it's going to be a problem for this guy on YouTube. That's why I cringe when I literally cringe, actually literally in the real sense of going when I watch his videos and go, oh God, to me it's sort of like, I think the experience for him ultimately will be similar to like somebody who maybe put out their own sex tape. I guess people do this. They tape themselves having sex and then they upload it to one of these sites on the internet that will broadcast it, and they're all like, "Oh wow, look at me!" And then 10 years later, they're like, "Oh my God, I wish I could get rid of that." And I think that'll be the case for this guy. He'll want to be rid of these videos eventually if he smartens up. Just like I kind of want to be rid of what I've bragged about. But accomplishments are funny, because everything you accomplish, at the moment you accomplish it, it can seem wonderful. It can seem great. When I first got the job at Tsuburaya Productions, I was super elated. Like, whoa, nobody's ever done this before. No non-Japanese person has ever... a few people has ever sort of worked full-time in the trenches with one of these companies. I should modify that. I did have a predecessor, but he didn't last very long. He didn't really like the movies that Tsuburaya Productions made, and he never got enthusiastic about it. I was a fan of the stuff, and getting the job working for the company was like, oh gosh, my life is going to be great from now on. And of course, it's been okay. It's been good. But it wasn't the solution to all my problems. So anything you accomplish is not going to be the solution to all your problems. I accomplished learning that riff for Lover All I Can. I did that about 10 minutes before the video, so that's why I'm kind of playing a little rough. And it was a kind of accomplishment. But I think a lot of things are accomplishments. I think people don't realize their own accomplishments often. Like my wife is baking sourdough bread lately, and she has accomplished something that I think is incredible, because she makes this delicious bread now, and I'm like, whoa, you made bread. I can't even imagine making bread. She works hard on this stuff, and it's good bread. And these are little things. The small things that you do are your real accomplishments. They're the things that really matter. The sort of, not the things you'll be remembered for, in infamy. Infamy, that's wrong. But actually that's a good point, because me and my wife also have been watching what's it called? Sean Combs' The Reckoning. It's all about Puff Daddy, the only thing I ever paid attention to of Puff Daddy was when I was in Japan. There was this group I liked, a girl group called Puffy, and they wanted to release one of their records, or maybe all their records, in America and make headway in America. But Puff Daddy, Sean Combs, complained, and they had to change their official name to Puffy Ami Yumi, because they were two girls, Ami and Yumi. So they became Puffy Ami Yumi, which is even harder to pronounce than Puffy. Anyway, that's all I know about Puffy. But now, I knew till I watched this documentary, and my God, he's accomplished a lot. But in order to do it, he had to become this horrible, horrible person. Like just the nastiest, horrible person that you could imagine. But he's got accomplishments, and often that's the trade-off you make. You trade off something that you really care about in order to make this accomplishment. And the accomplishment, where does it get you? Where did it get Sean Combs? I mean, some people think it's great to have money and power, but it looks like, to me, money and power are kind of a problem. Also, I wanted to point out something that quote, "Boys be ambitious." Most Japanese people and me only know that part of the quote, but actually the rest of the quote isn't so bad, so I'm going to read it to you. What William S. Clark actually said was, "Boys, be ambitious. Be ambitious not for money, not for selfish aggrandizement, I don't know how you pronounce that word, not for the evanescent thing which men call fame. Be ambitious for the attainment of all that a man can be. So it's a little better than just boys be ambitious, but it's still the attainment of all a man can be. Somebody recently wrote to me about obtaining satori or enlightenment, and I said no one obtains anything. There's no obtaining of it. It's not something you get and that you are now the owner of. It's something much more subtle than that that we're working on in the Zen project. And my golly, I've already waffled on for almost 20 minutes, so I don't want to try to go into a tangent about that. But I think the bottom line is, if you feel you haven't accomplished anything in life, look at your life and actually say, well, maybe I did accomplish something. I remember seeing an interview with Devo and Jerry Casale, who always is the one who gives the smart-ass answers. They were asking him about success, and he said, success to me is a successful bowel movement. But even things like that, I mean, undergoing the medical treatments that I've been talking about here, that's actually a big deal for me these days, and I'm not going to get into great detail about that. But little things like that are accomplishments. Taking your dog for a walk is an accomplishment. Doing the dishes is an accomplishment. These are things that matter, and if we pay attention to the small things that we're actually doing for others or even for ourselves, these are real accomplishments. And the kind of things you think of as accomplishments, in scare quotes, are often not all they're cracked up to be. They're often a trap that you get yourself into that you wish you hadn't. So don't worry too much if you haven't accomplished anything. You've accomplished something by actually, if you're doing Zazen, that's a great accomplishment. You've accomplished something by just being alive and just being the person that you are to other people who need you to be that person. I think that's an accomplishment. All right, so if you want to accomplish something by sending me some donations, that's a bad segue, you can do so by going to the URL that you're about to see on the screen below, or that you're about to hear if you're listening to the audio version, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main ways of making, really my only way. I always say main ways, but really they're the only way I'm making a living lately, especially this year with having to stay home all year. So I appreciate your donations, but as always, you don't got to donate if you don't want to donate. All right, we will see you again. Have a good time all the time. Be ambitious or not. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. What have you accomplished? Have you accomplished anything in your dog life? I think you accomplish a lot. You make us happy. You warm my feet at night when it's cold in the bed. I think you've accomplished a lot, Ziggy. All right, we'll see you later. Bye, Zig.